never heard of a killer? I drop bombs like Hiroshima.
Somebody said, look at LeakYou video. What the fuck is LeakYou? Is it like a site? What's LeakYou? LeakYou. Is it a YouTube channel? Oh, shit. Oh, all right, bet. Here we go.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I have done so many videos on the Wagner Group, on the Wagner Mercenary Group. Brutal group of mercenaries. These mercenaries, this group, which is a private army, or what is referred to as Putin's private army, have their hands in so much, including stealing minerals from people in a variety of places in Africa. As you all know, there's certain minerals made to make cell phones, laptops, all sorts of electronics. And you have to go to Africa to get the stones to do that. They have to be mined. And one of the things that the Wagner Group has done, along with several massacres of entire villages in Africa, they have taken control over these minerals on a lot of these mining sites in Africa. I've heard all kinds of stories. I've heard all kinds of stories about brutal men in the Wagner Group. A lot of these men that are part of this mercenary group called the Wagner Group are recruited from around the world. They want people with previous military experience. I've heard of Americans working for Wagner, for the Wagner Mercenary Group. Yes, you're right. You heard me right. Now, you've also heard of the Wagner Group probably recently in their front on Ukraine. Now, there was a lot of drama that happened this year between the leader of the Wagner Group, Prigozhin, Yevgeny Prigozhin. There's been a lot of drama between him and Putin. So much drama that Yevgeny Prigozhin, he actually began a march back to Moscow with a portion of his Wagner Group, saying that he was going to march on Moscow. Now, just imagine how mad that made Putin. Putin even had some words to say. Listen, so the story goes like this, and it is a mystery at this time, to be honest with you, on whether or not Prigozhin's even dead. You see, he's a man of very odd choices. And there was already talk of him faking his death a few months ago. But they're saying that he has been confirmed dead as of about 3 hours ago after genetic analysis proved. Because, see, the last 3 days, people have had it. One question is was he really in that plane? There was a plane crash on Wednesday in which 10 people were killed, including, according to Russia, Wagner Group mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. He has been confirmed dead after genetic analysis of the bodies from Wednesday's plane crash, according to Russian officials. They go on to say that after molecular genetic examinations were completed, the identities of all 10 dead were established, and they correspond to the list stated in the flight sheet of the aircraft that went down Wednesday north of Moscow. Prigozhin and some of his most trusted lieutenants, including Dmitry Utkin, a very shadowy figure with neo-Nazi tattoos known as Prigozhin's right-hand man. Logistics chief Valery Chekalov was also listed on the plane's manifest, along with 4 other passengers and 3 crew members. This private jet, which was destined for St. Petersburg in Russia, crashed 60 miles north of Moscow 2 months to the day after Prigozhin's failed coup attempt against President Vladimir Putin. Now, the Kremlin has denied it was behind the crash, and they are rejecting widespread. Okay. This video will probably be banned from being seen in Russia. I can tell you that. All of my Wagner videos have been banned from being watched in Russia. The Kremlin has denied being behind the crash, rejecting widespread speculation that this was a revenge assassination for Prigozhin's short-lived mutiny in late June, when Wagner fighters captured the southern Russian city of Rostov on dawn before marching on Moscow. I don't know how he thought that was going to work, but he tried it. They would eventually stop 120 miles south of the Russian capital after a deal brokered by the Belarusian president would allow Prigozhin and his fighters to leave Russia for its neighboring ally. And see, the president of Belarus, he's a very pivotal piece on this chessboard. You have to understand that. And from my understanding, Prigozhin did not take the Belarusian president up on that offer. He continued to stay in Russia, although the status of where he would be at any given time is always up for a lot of fodder, right? Now, Prigozhin's whereabouts have been clouded in mystery since then, since he tried to march on Moscow. He did appear in video in which he hinted that he was in Africa conducting reconnaissance, right? And making Russia even greater on every continent. Again, you just heard what I said about Africa. There's a lot of dirty shit going on in Africa when it comes to the Wagner Mercenary Group. They are killing people. They are stealing minerals, mined minerals. They've massacred entire villages. There's been entire human rights crimes that have been committed against Africans by this Wagner Mercenary Group. And no one has called Russia to the carpet on this yet. The only people that talk about it is bloggers like me. We're talking about potentially thousands of people that have been massacred by the Wagner Mercenary Group and their arm in Africa. Putin has acknowledged Prigozhin's death, calling him a, quote, talented businessman who dealt with oil, gas, and precious metals and gems. Oh, we know he dealt with precious metals and gems. He's killed people for those precious metals and gems. He also added that Prigozhin was a man with a complicated fate who has made many serious mistakes in his life. The following day, in a very clear attempt to bring such private mercenary groups under tighter state control, He ordered Wagner Group and other mercenary fighters to swear an oath of allegiance to the Russian state, in which they promised to follow strictly the rules of commanders and senior leaders. Earlier this year, the Russian Defense Ministry gave mercenary groups until July 1 to sign army contracts. This move angered Prigozhin ahead of his failed mutiny. Wagner fighters who did not take part have already been transferred to the regular Russian army. A St. Petersburg native like Putin, Prigozhin, a former convict and later a restaurateur, rose to power through lucrative catering contracts for Kremlin events, earning him the nickname Putin's Chef. He would go on to found the Wagner Group in 2014. And since then, the Wagner Group has been not only just dripped in horrible controversy and horrible stories that seem to follow them. This company operated in Syria, Mali, and the Central African Republic. One of the stories that I've heard out of the CAF, Central African Republic, it's a story I can never get out of my mind, was the butchering of 3 children under an orange tree by the Wagner Group. I'm sorry, it wasn't 3 children. It was 3 mothers, I believe 7 children. But they made sure to butcher the children in front of the mothers first. Then they butchered the mothers to death, machete style. The Wagner Group. So yeah, we know about him operating in the CAF. 2 years later, in 2016, the U.S. intelligence community sanctioned Prigozhin for his creation of the Internet Research Agency, a bot farm that interfered in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. What is Prigozhin doing founding a bot farm? He doesn't have, at that point and at that time, nothing to do with computers and didn't even have that kind of background. But I suspect he became Putin's, like a fall guy of Putin's. Last year, Prigozhin boasted that he had interfered in American elections and that he would do so again. Whether the bot farm, which polluted social media with conspiracy theories and disinformation, affected the results remains an open question. With the Wagner Group, Prigozhin initially remained in the shadows, denying he was even associated with the mercenaries, but he began to pursue a more public profile after Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine, where Wagner was known to use zombie soldiers or hurt soldiers or people that were injured, people that we're talking about, they would take soldiers that had been taken prisoner and use them as the first wave to take out all the mines that had been laid down type shit. Oh, yes. Very brutal man. Now, Prigozhin, after this whole invasion into Ukraine, he did appear in videos showing him recruiting prisoners. Remember, there was a whole big to-do about the recruitment of prisoners. When we all found out, when the whole world found out that Wagner Group was using zombie prisoners as the first wave, this embarrassed Putin. And I think that had also a lot to do with pulling Prigozhin out of the Ukraine and the Wagner Group, forcing them to come back and sign up with the Russian army. I want to explore a little video footage on this. Again, the question has been all week, Is he really dead? And can we believe Russia, or what they're saying? They did genetic analysis and confirmed. But also the question remains, did the Russian state defense shoot that private plane down? Again, he was surrounded by his top guys. It would have been a perfect opportunity to take that plane down.
Сегодня пополудня в 12 часов полностью был взят Бахмут.
This is crazy news.
Ну что, парни, все? Через 10-15 фланги.
То произошло не тактическое отступление. Поэтому товарищ Коношенков, мягко говоря, слукавил.
Идти без боеприпасов, потери в Бахмуте. Бесполезные и неоправданные. Мои парни не будут.
Ребята, вы крутые!
Парни, спасибо!
Спасибо! Спасибо!
Now, during the Battle of Bakhmut, he launched scathing attacks on Russia's top military brass, blaming them for not providing enough ammunition. But you see, this is from the Associated Press, right? The way that he operated this Wagner group, right? Grabbing people that were sick in hospitals or
Парни не будут.
people that had been held prisoners, POWs, and turn around and made them go in as, like I said, the first line, more likely to be killed first, and was in most cases. He said that he lost about 20,000 of his men in Bakhmut, roughly half of them inmates recruited from Russia's prisons. And that was the big to-do, right? When it was discovered to the world that Russia was using prisoners as the first line of defense to go out there and take the first hit, and a lot of them were not making it out of those lines. That hit different. That hit a little bit different, and I think caused a little bit of an embarrassment to Russia, being the fact Russia is such a large country. Why would you have to turn to prisoners? Then all of a sudden, it was Prigozhin's idea to use the prisoners, never Putin's idea to use the prisoners. But okay.
Это чьи-то, отцы и чьи-то сыновья. И те, которые не дают нам боеприпасы, будут в аду.
He's pissed about not getting ammunition.
У нас нехватка боеприпасов 70%. Шойгу, Герасимов, где боеприпасы?
So then he goes left.
Мы находимся в штабе.
He goes left, right? And he decides he's gonna stomp down on Moscow. He's gonna march on Moscow.
Часов 30 минут утра под контролем военные объекты Ростова, в том числе аэродром.
Однако организаторы мятежа, предав свою
This is
страну,
Putin saying
свой народ,
they are a
преодолели
rebellion.
тех, кого
It's like, how are you going to have a private army that turns on you? Right? Because that's exactly what happened. This is your army, your private army. They protect you in a lot of different aspects from what I heard in his coastal estate, which is worth more than some countries. Okay. But how's your own private army going to turn on you?
чтобы стрелять в своих.
He wanted the fame. I think that kind of got him a little bit as well.
Выполнение задач, которые были поставлены и которые мы давали обещание, что справимся.
So regardless of whether or not, okay. Hold on, I want to see this. Hold on. Let's take a look at the crash itself. This is the actual crash. This is the business jet that he was on that crashed. Just fell out of the sky. The way it's falling out of the sky, it makes one wonder, right? Now, some social media channels close to Wagner have said that this plane was shot down. But again, we don't see any evidence of that on camera.
On the plane that was
Let's
carrying
listen.
Prigozhin that went down in Russia, was it a bomb that took the plane down?
So a couple things. I know there's a lot of interest in this topic. I'll say right up front, first of all, our initial assessment is that it's likely Prigozhin was killed. We're continuing to assess the situation. We don't have any information to indicate right now. The press reporting stating that there was some type of surface-to-air missile that took down the plane, that we assess that information to be inaccurate. Again, nothing to indicate, no information to suggest that there was a surface-to-air missile. But beyond that, I'm really just not going to have any further information.
What was it? Something that came internal from inside the plane?
Again, I don't have any additional insight to provide on that. Thank you. Oren.
I just want to check the first thing you said. Our initial assessment is that it's likely Prigozhin was killed. You mean killed intentionally, a la this may well have been an assassination.
Killed in this airplane crash.
He was on board. And what leads you to believe that? What information do you have to suggest that he was on board? Or is this based on the fact that you have no reason to doubt Russian reports?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the specifics of how we gather information other than, again, our initial assessment based on a variety of factors is that he was likely killed.
But not just based on Russian statements, I would imagine.
Based on a variety of factors.
All right, we're going to keep going here.
We watched a plane on fire fall out of the sky and crash into the ground, killing Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner Mercenary Group, who orchestrated an attempted coup against President Vladimir Putin. Russian authorities confirmed Prigozhin was on a plane that crashed, leaving no survivors. The Kremlin has denied any involvement by Vladimir Putin. Putin released a statement saying, quote, "He was a man of difficult fate, and he made serious mistakes in life," end quote. That's what you see in a dictatorship. No surrendering at a jail, no mugshots, no innocent until proven guilty. A citizen of a dictatorship sees a plane crash out of the sky and wonders, if that can happen to a mercenary leader, what can the government do to me? A citizen of a democracy sees a former president getting the same treatment as any other accused and understands that no one is above the law. Joining us now is Michael McFaul, who served as the United States ambassador to Russia from 2012 to 2014. He's an MSNBC international affairs analyst. Sir, it is good to see you again. Let's just be clear. No love lost for most people for Yevgeny Prigozhin. The point here is that what happened to Prigozhin was entirely predictable, because that's what happens to people who run afoul of authority in a place like Russia.
That's right, Al. It's a great point. He was a thug. He was a criminal. By my judgment, right? He did a lot of bad things, and not just in Ukraine, but in Africa and Syria. But he did not have any way to defend himself, like you said. And the way that he was taken out in this just incredibly audacious way, again, we need to underscore, we don't know all the facts, so I'll just keep using allegedly, but pretty clear, allegedly, that this plane blew up and he was on it. That's the way Vladimir Putin deals with people that he doesn't like, or he arrests them, or he poisons them, or he throws them in jail for 25 years for criticizing his war, as happened to several dissidents. But there's no rule of law in Russia, that's for sure.
Let's talk about that last point you just made. When we in the West look at Russia and we wonder, given the pressure that they are under, given the backlash they have faced for the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, why does the average Russian go along with this? And there are two important points. One is the average Russian doesn't readily have access to good information flow. And two is they have weakened any meaningful opposition in Russia because meaningful opposition leaders are in jail. Navalny is in jail. Kara-Murza is in jail.
That's exactly right. And those 2 points are exactly the right ones. First, bad information. So those that support Putin are those that watch Russian propaganda channels on TV. By the way, the younger people in Russia, polling's hard to do in Russia, let's be clear. That's also hard to do in dictatorships. But to the best of our knowledge, those that get their information from YouTube and other websites and not from television tend to be younger, urban, educated people. They don't support the war. But do they protest against the war today? The answer is no, because your second point. They did in the beginning. I think a lot of people forgot that tens of thousands of people did protest, and then Putin did exactly what you just described with Navalny, with Kara-Murza, with Ilya Yashin and others. He put them in jail for years and years and years, and that is a deterrent for people to protest. And that's why so many people have their heads down inside Putin's Russia today.
Well, let's also not forget that Alexander Navalny was also poisoned. Okay, he was poisoned he was poisoned by an unknown substance to us very badly. He was so thin, his hair was falling out. He looked horrible. So on top of the fact that he has now been put in prison, Navalny has been staunch anti-Putin for years. And I was surprised he walked around as long as he did before Putin got his hands on him, honestly. Anyway, I'm going to kind of take this, and I know we've been live 28 minutes, but I'm not done because I want to look up a little bit more here on him. To be honest, I want to explore his activities in the CAF. Because you have to understand that he was doing what Russia wanted him to do. There we go.
The Central African Republic is a failed state, torn apart by civil war. The infant mortality rate is the third worst in the world, and it's heartbreaking to witness. In the capital, Bangui, I saw children starving to death. At the only pediatric hospital, they filled room after room.
What's it like for you, as the director here, to see all these cases?
It upsets me, she says. Mothers don't have money to buy food, and the children fall into this state. They are victims of Africa's resource curse. The people are poor, despite living on land with vast, untapped wealth. Here, it's gold and diamonds. But instead of lifting people out of poverty, the riches flow into the hands of Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group, Russia's private army, known for its brutality in Ukraine. Wagner's leader is Yevgeny Prigozhin, President Putin's former caterer turned commander. In Ukraine, Wagner fights for the Kremlin. It makes its money here. According to 2 Western diplomats in Bangui, Wagner is extracting $500 million a year in gold, rare timber, and blood diamonds. This woman, who who asked us to conceal her identity for her protection, lived in the village of Indasima, where her husband was a gold miner. She told me how Russian mercenaries arrived, armed and in vehicles, and ordered the villagers to leave.
They were beating people, whipping people, and chasing them away.
When her husband and 7 others refused to go, they were executed.
What do you think the Russians wanted? Gold? You think it's as simple as that?
Yes, they came for our wealth and for our gold. Today, my children don't have a father. They don't have anything at all.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much for telling us. I know it's very difficult. Thank you.
The independent research group Sentry provided NBC News with more than a dozen witness accounts of violence by Wagner forces near the Indasima gold mine and other mine sites. This was Indasima in 2019, before the Russian takeover. An image taken this month shows the mine has expanded dramatically. Analysts say it is now generating untraceable profits for Wagner. Wagner was invited into the Central African Republic by the government to help crush a rebellion. And it worked. The capital is now far more secure. Wagner made a movie about its military campaign called The Tourist, showing its men defeating the rebels and saving the day. It was a hit and helped make Wagner popular.
Do you think it's true, or do you think it's propaganda?
It's all true. It's history, he says. There's a statue honoring Wagner on Bangi's main boulevard. The group even provides the personal security for the president.
Mr. President, it's a real pleasure. Richard Engel, thank you very much. You've said quite famously that if your house is on fire, you don't care what color the water is. So I understand why you reached out and you accepted Russian help. Are you happy with it?
You journalists are here. You should ask this question to the Central African people. They will answer you. I am here to make sure that this population is protected.
The government depends on Wagner for its survival. Wagner pays itself in gold. The people are left starving.
We reached out to Prigozhin. He responded with a voice note, calling our questions provocative and saying in part, quote, "You've received enough information. If by asking these questions you intended just to spit at me, then I suggest you come closer. And after that, try to figure out if it's your throat in my hands or someone else's."
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
That was 2 months ago when that was made. All right. But I was talking about their atrocities in the Central African Republic like 3 years ago. And I'm talking about atrocities.
And you also have some exclusive reporting, Clarissa, about Russian mercenaries in the Central African Republic facing multiple allegations of war crimes, including torture, rape, and murder. What else did you learn?
That's right. So it's no secret that Russian mercenaries are active in at least half a dozen countries around the world. They've been accused of fomenting instability. But now, according to our investigation, they may well be guilty of war crimes. We wanted to travel to the Central African Republic, but we were refused access on the grounds of our previous reporting on the Russian presence there. Still, we managed to send someone to interview victims and witnesses of these crimes. We had to change their names and disguise their faces for their own protection. And I do want to warn our viewers that some of this material is graphic.
The aftermath of a massacre at a mosque in the city of Bambari in the Central African Republic. At least 12 bodies are visible on the ground. A woman and a child are among the dead. Dozens of civilians had taken shelter in the Al Taqwa Mosque that day, after witnesses say Russian mercenaries and government troops came hunting for rebel fighters. Abdullahi was inside the mosque. But instead of finding sanctuary, he told CNN they became targets.
The gendarmerie and the Russians asked us to take the women and children out of the mosque. 6 of us walked out with our hands raised. They searched us and found nothing. We hadn't even gone 5 meters when they started shooting at us. 4 people died, 1 jumped a wall, and I was shot in the right foot.
That same day, Jabrila told CNN her 15-year-old son was killed by Russians firing from a helicopter. When her husband went out to find him, he was shot down too.
My husband was buried together with my 15-year-old son. When the burial was over, we couldn't even say a word. I was crying. My children also came next to me, wailing. It was the Russians who killed my husband, leaving me with children in pain.
A confidential UN report found that abuses were carried out on both sides in Bambari, but that the Russians may have committed war crimes, and it does not appear to be an isolated incident. Over several months, CNN and the independent investigative group The Sentry have obtained testimony and documents implicating Russian contractors deployed to train the Central African Army in a wide range of atrocities during fighting between government and rebel forces, including mass shootings, torture, and the burning of villages. Sorcha McLeod is on the UN Working Group on Mercenaries. In March, it sent details of alleged abuses to the Russian and Central African Republic governments.
Grave human rights abuses, including rape, summary executions, targeted killings, torture, forced disappearances, murders, and other abuses. I mean, we're talking about war crimes here, potentially, are we not?
Yes, we are. We are seeing some of the most serious human rights violations and humanitarian law violations, and we're seeing them on a widespread scale. People on the ground are absolutely terrified.
It is a stark contrast from the story Russia tells. In this recent movie, Tourist, funded by a company associated with the Russian mercenaries, they are lauded as heroic defenders who have liberated Central Africa. In reality, Russia's presence in this war-torn, mineral-rich nation has always been controversial, even as it has ballooned from 170 contracted trainers in 2017 to around 2,300 now, according to a UN document obtained by The Sentry, with more than 30 bases spread out across the country. 39-year-old teacher Nemery shows our camera the scars from wounds he says were inflicted by Russian mercenaries at an outpost outside Bambari. They took us to the Russian base, tied us up with rope, and started to torture us. They even used a bayonet to injure my left foot deeply, he says. Their actions were evil and barbaric.
We are seeing a pattern of behavior by these Russian private contractors. This has happened in other countries. We've seen it, for example, in relation to Libya, where Russian private contractors were involved in a variety of human rights violations, in a variety of international humanitarian law violations.
But for the victims of these alleged crimes, there is little hope for justice. Private military contractors are technically illegal in Russia, and so don't officially exist. And many locals live in fear of repercussions from a shadowy and unaccountable force.
CNN obviously tried to reach out to multiple people to get some response from the Russian side. We approached Yevgeny Prigozhin. He is the Russian oligarch with close ties to President Putin, who is believed to be behind these mercenary groups. He's also the architect of the famous troll factory that was involved with the meddling in the U.S. election back in 2016. Unsurprisingly, he did not respond to our request for comment, and the Russian government also did not respond, but they did respond respond to the UN Working Group on Mercenaries letters of allegation saying that Russian trainers in the Central African Republic are unarmed and not participating in hostilities. Well, we can say definitively, Pamela, based on our extensive reporting, that that simply is not true.
The president of the Central African Republic has been trying to regain control of his country by leaning on an unlikely ally, a Kremlin-backed private military contractor known as Wagner. Their task is to train the national military and work with a paramilitary group known by locals as the Sharks. But together, they've been accused of doing more than fight off the rebels who've controlled most of the country since 2013.
We've been hearing tons of stories about a certain unit of the military that's being trained by the Russians that's been disappearing people, arresting people, committing other human rights abuses. And it's been really difficult to get people to actually talk to us about it. But after a few weeks of working with local human rights activists, they've identified a few people who are willing to talk as long as we hide their identities.
Abida, which is not her real name, sells fabric in the predominantly Muslim neighborhood of the capital known as PK5. Most rebel groups here are from the historically marginalized Muslim community, so Muslims are often swept up in these operations. When a rebel alliance led by the former president marched on the capital in January, she fled with her family.
Then évidemment les sanctions me voyager mon acheter un petit chim quoi ça là me go payer à ça rami acte de licence mo acte de licence na go ça la CPC ministre ci intérêt mo be ci mi kiri là mi wara turu guna legi areken de go chum be ci mi atena marcha la sole ngba ci diala so wal musulman so o ça la mumbi azami na ci auto alors go la musique na ci auto.
And when they took you to the hillside, what were they saying?
Là minga posente là ko minga pose besira dumbi ke mi kono ke minga pose là ko mi bagila na photo una tele mete mbato so minga là ko o mi la mi de ku français c'était oh chérie aide tene muzo mo islam mo ki ko le chrétien pe mo ki ko le chrétien pe là so mo ki pas quoi ça la mumbi ala zibo mo akere chimbi ala falengi chimbi chia chimbi ala utiliser mbi
Abida told us that white men in the group also used a device to upload her phone contacts and review her recent calls.
How has that day affected you mentally?
Vie tranquille, appelle me merde. Façon comme on a mis, ça c'était comme ça, la radio, je l'ai mis, mais pas tard. Na bimi la mun jona. Abitene la sumingi so mi bando njona pe mi bando fufu. Benchi be fa so mi sera mete misigina le kirkira fa. Mi sera mbeto. Mi sera mbeto.
Our team reviewed incident reports for 9 other victims of alleged abuses that Russian soldiers oversaw or directly took part in 2021. Activists say they have 46 documented cases in total. We took their claims to Mary Noel Koyara, the Minister of Defense and one of the architects of the deal with the Russians.
There have been some reports from human rights groups and from some victims who we've spoken to ourselves that in incidents with Russian troops have committed human rights abuses, including torture and sexual abuse of victims in their efforts to hunt down the rebels. Is this something that you're addressing?
Les ONG, ils vont sur le terrain, ils font des rapports. Bon, nous, on n'est pas au courant. Ils font des rapports, ils envoient des partenaires. Ils disent qu'il y a un non-respect des droits de l'homme. Mais si vous ne vous adressez pas au gouvernement qui est concerné, comment on peut avoir une solution? Comment on peut aller faire les enquêtes? Comment on peut aller déceler si ce qui se dit est vrai?
Will you look into it now that we mentioned it?
Il faudrait que les ONG nous donnent les bonnes informations pour permettre au gouvernement de prendre les bonnes décisions et de suivre les actions sur le terrain.
But one alleged victim of torture at a Russian base did push the government to investigate. According to his brother, who we're calling Bashir, he was killed for speaking out.
Can you tell me how your brother got caught up in the violence?
Alangbala ritelo agolu na shi basala ni ke lokwe
le faire partie ti azu so gbungumbe le faire partie sile ka so gbungumbe kala gwaluka akumeze torturer lo ala na torture na fa maboko lozo timbilozo amulu comme le ça père de menemingi amulu amuna gendarmerie.
Ultimately, a local government official cleared him of any wrongdoing and he was released. He had been held and tortured for 3 days at the base and for 3 more weeks in an army hospital in Bangui. He reported what happened to him to the local government and human rights investigators.
Alors, commencé à répondre ville qui bon béton le gona l'autre la mosquée. Parce que bon mosquée le prier quoi qui ngolo azwa suivre l'amener le mont à il peut ça suivre le ala ngala pika l'angombe. Parce que m'a dit congolais sigi ala.
Their father pushed local rebel leaders for an explanation.
Aga découvrir que voilà a élément na mu patana mbachentene ala go follow bachiso a profilo ni contre la sia sigande a Jean de Chakana bombarini la fois la éliminer lo comme ala wana pe go sara na ba dans la pays gas les kanda go sara.
Diplomatic sources say the claims of Bashir's family are credible, and they're in line with allegations made in a letter sent to Russia by UN human rights experts in April. Investigators wrote that they were concerned about, quote, grave human rights abuses carried out by private military contractors in CAR, including a, quote, Russian-based organization known as the Wagner Group. Russia's ambassador dismissed the claims as baseless, dangerous misinformation. We spoke to one of the researchers who wrote the letter.
Do these findings fit in with a global pattern of what the Wagner Group is allegedly doing around the world in other countries?
Absolutely. So previously we have looked at the role of Wagner in relation to Libya. For example, there were allegations that they'd been involved in extrajudicial killings, and there were also allegations that these contractors were in fact directly participating in the armed conflict. It's extremely concerning. What we're seeing is a pattern of behavior. As soon as you bring private contractors in, it raises all sorts of concerns about accountability. Within militaries, you have clear systems of accountability, you have codes of military justice, you have court-martials. But as soon as you bring these private actors in, it's not clear necessarily what the chains of command are. They're not necessarily even identifiable. So for civilian populations, it's really difficult. They don't know who to turn to because they don't know who actually committed these violations and abuses against them.
Have you had any response from Russia or the Central African Republic government yet?
The Central African government hasn't directly come back to us yet, and we haven't received anything from Russia. But again, Russia has 60 days in which to respond. It's fundamental that states understand that they cannot escape their human rights responsibilities by using private contractors.
Still in mourning and afraid of further retribution, Bashir's family has given up lobbying their case with the government.
How do you feel when you think about the fact that a foreign military did this to your brother in his own country?
Ibala ala ngba kodoni ala ga ala wanda ga kodoni non seulement ala collaborer na mingi kodona mais ala tia famille kodoni et puis ni a continuer au fur et à mesure de il parle à soi sans banani so tene à traduire devant justice. Vu que banatani au fur et à mesure en boîte.
I think that provides a better understanding of who this leader was, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is now dead under mysterious circumstances, with some even claiming that he wasn't in the plane that crashed. These men are so disgusting. These this private army, those men that work for that private army. And my understanding is they get recruited from all around the world. You've had some kind of military experience, especially any kind of like special forces type experience. My understanding is Wagner wanted to hire you. I agree, Dolly. I mean, the voices were so evident, right? Yeah. Listen, guys, I'm out of here. I wanted to bring this information to you, especially after Putin confirmed that Prigozhin was dead, which is just so odd. I wonder why he even spoke on it. I'll never know, but he did. Maybe he wants, I mean, maybe Putin is just that cold, cold-blooded killer, and come and stare us in the face and say what he said. I mean, he literally said the man had a conflicted life and he didn't always make the best decisions. Wow. I would have been honestly, if I would have been Prigozhin, I would have been scared to death that my life was going to be taken from me months ago after he did that attempted his coup on Putin. I mean, we all knew that Prigozhin was a dead man walking. Real talk. It was just a matter of time. And that matter of time took 2 months in a dramatic plane crash that took the life of Prigozhin and some of his most trusted confidants. Seems like to me, he made the numero uno mistake when you're somebody of importance. And I don't know if you all have ever been under rules like that, but even for me now, currently, when I fly, there are certain rules about me flying. I can't fly with somebody in the same group as me. I can't fly on the same plane with them, that type of stuff. And it seems to me that, Prigozhin didn't even think about that. I don't know. Did he think he was safe on that private plane? Probably. But he shouldn't have even been on the plane with his right-hand man and his left-hand man and his trusted consigliere. They shouldn't have all been on the plane. Because if you kill them all at the same time, that's a big dent in a lot of things. Operations, but I mean, from a perspective of an enemy, it's a good thing, right? But from the perspective of your own side, it's never a good thing. So if you are somebody of importance, you should never travel with your right-hand man. You should never travel with your family in the same plane. That type of thing. And the higher you get up on that food chain, the more important that becomes. Anyway, I'm out, guys. Thanks to everybody who came through. Shout out to the chat. He fucked around and found out, Emmanuel. Prigozhin fucked around and found out. Until next time, everyone.